The unlikely guardian. The crystalline spires of the Grand Archive of Harmonious Knowledge stretched toward the binary stars of the Centauri Reach, their surfaces refracting light in patterns that made most species weep with joy. Most species, that is, except humans. Commander Lyra Harrison simply squinted and adjusted her photochromatic visor, more concerned with the tactical implications of all that sparkly nonsense. 12 separate entry points on the ground level alone, she muttered, making notes on her neural interface. And those crystal formations would make perfect cover for someone with ill intent. Behind her, First Archivist Zinfal's tendrils rippled with distress, creating soft chiming sounds that echoed through the archive's entrance chamber. Commander, please. This is a sanctuary of knowledge, not a battlefield. Your military assessments disturbed the harmonic resonance. Lyra turned to face the archivist, unable to suppress a slight smile at how the elegant alien tried to maintain maximum distance while still technically being in conversation range. Like most members of the stellar Concordat, Zinfal viewed humans as fascinating but terrifying curiosities, useful in times of crisis, but preferably kept at arm's length, or tendrils length in this case. With respect, Archivist, Lyra replied, anything worth protecting can become a battlefield. The Galactic Peace Corps assigned me here because your sanctuary received threats. Real ones. The Arcade's vast entrance hall, usually filled with scholars from 100 species, stood nearly empty. Word of a human peacekeeper's arrival had spread quickly, and most of the regular inhabitants had found urgent research to conduct in the furthest reaches of the facility. Only Zinfal and a small group of senior archivists remained, their crystalline bodies vibrating with barely contained anxiety. But your methods, Zinfal's voice chimed with diplomatic distress. Yesterday, you requested to install what you called countermeasures in our sacred reading rooms. The day before, you suggested transforming our meditation chambers into fallback positions. Some of our most sensitive specimens have begun expressing stress pigmentation. Lyra walked to one of the crystal walls, her boots making solid sounds that caused nearby archivists to flinch. She reached out and touched the surface, feeling the slight vibration. Tell me, Archivist, what's the composition of these walls? Living crystal, Zinfal replied, tendrils weaving complex patterns of pride and concern. Grown over centuries, attuned to the emotional harmonies of all who study here. They are repositories of knowledge themselves, capable of storing and sharing wisdom through resonance patterns. Fascinating, Lyra said, and meant it. Also terrible from a security standpoint. Sound carries. Vibrations transfer. Anyone with the right equipment could probably read your entire archive from outside the building. She paused, considering. Though I suppose that would give them one hell of a headache. The assembled archivists produced a collective harmonic of distress. One of the younger ones actually started to crystallize in shock, their surface taking on a cloudy, alarmed pattern. Commander Harrison, Zinfal chimed firmly, while we appreciate the Galactic Peace Corps concern, perhaps they could send someone more, attuned to our ways. Someone less human, Lyra supplied helpfully. Marshal, Zinfal finished diplomatically. Lyra was about to respond when her neural interface pinged. She held up a hand for silence, her cybernetic eyes scanning the incoming data. The archivists watched in fascination and horror as small lights danced beneath her skin, visible signs of her technological augmentations. Speaking of Marshal, she said quietly, we've got incoming signals. 3 ships running silent, no transponders. They're trying to mask their approach using your binary star's radiation. She turned to Zinfal, all business now. Still think this isn't a battlefield. The Archive's warning systems hadn't even registered the threat yet, but Lyra was already moving. She pulled a small device from her utility belt and tossed it to Zinfal, who caught it reflexively with a tendril. Emergency quantum beacon, she explained. If things go bad, push the center twice. It'll alert the nearest GPC rapid response team. She started walking toward the Archive's security center, her stride purposeful. "Now, I need everything you have on your ventilation systems, structural weak points, and any secret passages your ancestors might have built in. Don't give me that look. Every ancient building has secret passages. Humans didn't corner the market on paranoia." Zinfel and the other archivists exchanged complex harmonics of concern, but the first archivist moved to follow her. "Commander, just how bad do you think this situation might become?" Lyra paused, glancing back with a grin that showed too many teeth by most species standards. "Bad enough that you'll be glad you've got a Deathworlder on your side. Now about those secret passages." As she led the reluctant archivists toward the security center, Lyra's neural interface continued tracking the approaching ships. 3 vessels, professional running patterns, definitely not here for the library's late fee amnesty program. The archive's crystal walls sang with increasing tension, picking up on the archivist's growing fear. Lyra simply smiled. Finally, a chance to show these peaceful scholars that sometimes the best librarian was one who knew how to fight. The approaching trouble would prove her point, one way or another. Whispers of war. The security center of the Grand Archive hummed with discordant energies as Lyra's tactical displays clashed with the crystalline architecture's natural resonances. Ancient knowledge and modern warfare, meeting in a symphony that made the archivist's crystalline forms vibrate with discomfort. "These sections here," Lyra pointed to a holographic display of the archive's lower levels. "What's down there?" Zinfel's tendrils twisted in what Lyra had learned to recognize as embarrassment. "The forbidden harmonic section. No one has accessed those archives in over 3 centuries. The resonances are troubling." "Troubling how?" Lyra's cybernetic eyes narrowed, scanning the schematics with increased interest. Before the first archivist could respond, one of the younger scholars, Velthin, chimed in eagerly. "The records speak of knowledge that creates discordant patterns in living crystal. Weapons, some say, though we prefer not to use such aggressive terms." Velthin. Zinfel's rebuke came in a sharp harmonic that made the security center's walls shiver. "Such matters are not for discussion with." The first archivist trailed off, tendrils twisting apologetically. "With Deathworlders." Lyra finished, her smile carrying that peculiar human warmth that somehow managed to be both reassuring and terrifying. "Interesting how you've got weapons cached away in your basement, but my security measures are too militant." The approaching ships had slowed, taking up positions that suggested professional military training. Lyra's neural interface flagged their movement patterns as matching 3 different species' tactical doctrines. A coalition, then. But why target a library? "First archivist," Lyra said, her voice carrying the weight of command. "I need to see those lower levels. Now." "Impossible." Zinfel's entire form clouded with alarm. "The resonances could damage your neural systems, and the security protocols will be less damaging than whatever's about to come knocking," Lyra interrupted. She gestured to her tactical display, where the 3 ships had begun deploying smaller craft. "Those are boarding shuttles. Military grade, running silent. Whatever they want, they're not here for your overdue book finds." A security center erupted in a cascade of harmonic distress signals as the archivists processed this information. Lyra waited it out, noting how the crystal walls absorbed and amplified their fear. Beautiful architecture, she thought, but terrible for morale in a crisis. "There is a way," Velthin ventured, earning another sharp harmonic from Zinfel. "The maintenance passages. They're shielded against resonance to protect the maintenance screws." Lyra's grin widened. "I knew there were secret passages. There are always secret passages." The next few minutes passed in organized chaos as Lyra prepared for descent. She checked her tactical gear while Velthin, appointed as her guide despite Zinfel's protests, explained the passage system's layout. The other archivists established a security lockdown, their crystalline forms humming with frequencies that sealed doors and activated ancient defensive measures. The passages were designed for crystalline maintenance drones, Velthin explained as they approached a hidden access panel. "They may be somewhat confined for your species. Lyra snorted, checking her weapon systems. Trust me, kid. Humans wrote the book on crawling through maintenance shafts. We put them in everything we build, usually before we even know why we'll need them. The access panel dissolved at Velthan's touch, revealing a narrow tunnel that seemed to be made of smoky, opaque crystal. As Lyra made final adjustments to her gear, Zinthal approached, moving with the formal precision that marked important ceremonial occasions. Commander Harrison, the first archivist harmonics were pitched low, meant for private conversation. If you encounter anything in the forbidden harmonics section, anything that resonates with violence, please remember that knowledge itself is neutral. It is the wielder who makes it dangerous. Lyra checked her neural shielding one last time. Don't worry, Archivist. I'm not here to judge your ancestors' weapons research. I'm here to keep it out of the wrong hands. As if emphasizing her point, the Archive's outer sensors registered the boarding shuttle's final approach. They were being clever about it, using the crystal spire's natural resonance patterns to mask their signatures. Clever, but not clever enough to fool human military-grade sensors. Time to go, Lyra announced, already moving into the maintenance passage. Velthan, lead the way. First Archivist, remember the quantum beacon. 2 pushes if anything up here goes sideways. The passage sealed behind them, leaving Lyra and her crystalline guide in a space that seemed to swallow light itself. Her cybernetic eyes adjusted, picking out path markers that pulsed with faint bioluminescence. These passages, Velthan's harmonics were muted by the shielding, creating an oddly intimate atmosphere. They were built during what our historians call the resonant conflicts, a time when knowledge itself became a weapon. Knowledge is always a weapon, Lyra replied, ducking under a low-hanging crystal formation. The trick is making sure it's pointed in the right direction. They descended deeper, the passage gradually widening into what Lyra's tactical systems identified as a military-grade facility, disguised but unmistakable to someone with her training. The walls here weren't just shielded, they were hardened, designed to contain something. Your ancestors weren't just storing weapons research down here, Lyra observed, scanning the increasingly complex security measures they passed. They were developing them. Velthan's crystalline form dimmed slightly, a sign of discomfort. The resonant conflicts changed our understanding of harmony. We learned that sometimes, to maintain peace, you need to be ready for war, Lyra finished. Welcome to the human experience, kid. Above them, Lyra's neural interface detected the first breaching attempts at the Archive's outer doors. The intruders were being careful, methodical, trying to avoid drawing attention. They clearly didn't expect serious resistance from a bunch of librarians. They definitely weren't expecting a human. As they approached the final security checkpoint before the forbidden harmonics section, Lyra's tactical systems began picking up strange readings. The crystalline walls here pulsed with complex patterns that made her neural shielding work overtime. Better tell me what we're about to walk into, kid, Lyra said, watching as Velthan interfaced with the checkpoint's crystal matrix. What kind of weapons are we talking about? The young archivist's response was interrupted by a sound that shouldn't have been possible through the shielded passages, the distinctive resonance of crystal shattering somewhere above them. Therein, Lyra's neural interface was already processing tactical options, and they're not being careful anymore. Time's up, kid. What's down here that's worth attacking a library over? Velthan's form pulsed with patterns Lyra hadn't seen before. Not fear, not exactly, but something deeper, something that made her combat instincts go on high alert. Not weapons, Commander. The young archivist's harmonics were barely audible. Something far more dangerous. Truth. The final door dissolved, revealing a chamber that made Lyra's extensive combat experience seem suddenly, worryingly inadequate. Knowledge, it seemed, had teeth, and they were about to find out who it would bite. The storm breaks. The forbidden harmonics chamber defied Lyra's combat-enhanced senses. Crystalline structures spiraled in impossible geometries, each surface inscribed with living data that shifted and flowed like liquid knowledge. But it was the central pillar that drew her attention, a column of pure resonance that seemed to bend light and sound around itself. The harmonic codex. Velthen's voice carried reverential fear. The complete historical record of every species' first contact with the others. The others. Lyra's neural interface was struggling to process the readings from the pillar. You mean the species that vanished from this sector 10,000 years ago? Before Velthen could respond, the Archive's emergency frequencies erupted with chaos. Above them, the invaders had breached the main security perimeters. Lyra's tactical feeds showed 3 distinct groups converging on their position. Nexari Void Hunters, Krelthian shock troops, and something her systems couldn't identify. They're not here to destroy the archives, Lyra realized, watching the tactical patterns emerge. This is a recovery operation. They're looking for something specific. She turned to Velthen. What's in that record that's worth dying for? The young archivist's crystalline form pulsed with complex emotions. The truth about why the others left, and what they left behind. Explosions rocked the upper levels. Through her neural interface, Lyra watched as the Archive's defensive systems engaged, and failed spectacularly. The invaders knew exactly how to counter them. They had inside help, she muttered. Someone gave them the Archive's security protocols. She glanced at Velthen. No offense, kid, but your people are terrible at keeping military secrets. We're archivists, Velthen chimed defensively. Our purpose is to preserve and share knowledge, not hide it. Sometimes, Lyra checked her weapons. Hiding knowledge is the only way to preserve it. Echoes of understanding. The next hour became a desperate game of cat and mouse through the Archive's crystalline corridors. Lyra used every trick in the human combat manual, and several that weren't in any manual, to keep the invaders away from the harmonic codex. The Archive's very architecture became both battlefield and weapon as she used its resonance patterns to confuse enemy sensors. But it was what she learned between skirmishes that truly changed everything. The codex wasn't just a historical record, it was a warning. The others hadn't vanished. They'd fled. Something was coming, something that had hunted them across galaxies. They'd left behind weapons disguised as knowledge, hidden in plain sight within the archives of younger species. Your ancestors didn't build weapons, Lyra told Velthen as they fortified their position. They inherited them. The whole archive is one big weapons cache, isn't it? The young archivist's form rippled with acknowledgement. The crystalline architecture, the resonance patterns, all of it was designed to be converted into defensive systems. If we ever faced the same threat the others fled from. Another explosion rocked the chamber. The invaders were getting closer, their coordination suggesting they knew exactly what they were looking for. They're not here for weapons. Velthen's harmonics carried sudden realization. They're here because their long-range sensors detected something entering the sector, something that matches the others' descriptions of their hunters. Lyra's neural interface pinged with urgent data. Multiple ships had just emerged from hyperspace at the sector's edge. Their configurations were wrong, impossible geometries that hurt to look at. Well, Lyra checked her remaining ammunition. Guess we're about to find out if your ancestors' inheritance works. Serenity through strength. The final battle for the archive wasn't fought with weapons or resonance patterns. It was fought with truth. When the hunters arrived, twisted things that existed in too many dimensions, they found not a scattered collection of squabbling species, but a unified defense. Lyra had managed to convince both the Archive's defenders and the invaders that they faced a common enemy. The very knowledge they'd been fighting over became their salvation. The Archive's crystalline spires transformed, each resonance pattern shifting into configurations the others had designed millennia ago. The invaders' ships, instead of fleeing, took up defensive positions, and at the center of it all stood a human, coordinating the defense with the same intensity she'd once used to protect the Archive's secrets. You know what I don't get, Lyra said to Velthen, as they watched the hunter's ships shatter against the archive's now-activated defenses. Why the others left these weapons to your people? Why not a more militant species? Velfin's form shimmered with what Lyra had learned to recognize as amusement. Perhaps because we would only use them when necessary. Violence without wisdom is just destruction. And wisdom without the capacity for violence is just philosophy, Lyra added, watching as another hunter ship broke apart. The battle lasted 3 days. When it was over, the hunters retreated, their impossible geometries torn apart by weapons disguised as architecture. The archive stood, transformed but unbroken, its true nature finally revealed. In the aftermath, as representatives from a dozen species gathered to discuss their new reality, Lyra found herself back in the main entrance hall. The crystalline walls still sang with knowledge. But now she understood the deeper harmonics, the martial songs hidden beneath the surface. Commander Harrison, Zinthal approached, moving with newfound confidence. The Galactic Council has requested our recommendations for establishing similar archives in other sectors. They believe we need more installations combining knowledge with strength. Lyra smiled, her neural interface already drafting plans. Let me guess, they want humans involved in the planning. Indeed. The first archivist's form pulsed with what might have been humor. It seems our species have more to learn from each other than we realized. Your kind's comfort with violence, properly tempered by our dedication to knowledge, makes for one hell of a library security system, Lyra finished. She looked up at the transformed spires, remembering how terrified everyone had been of having a human protector. You know what's funny? I finally understand why humans make other species so nervous. We're not just comfortable with violence. We're comfortable with the responsibility it brings. Above them, the binary stars cast their light through crystal that now served as both archive and fortress. Knowledge and power, wisdom and strength, brought together by the species everyone had feared to trust with either. The archive had found its serenity not despite the human's presence, but because of it. Sometimes, Lyra reflected, the best guardians of peace were those who truly understood war. So, she turned to Zinful. About those other archives we need to build. I've got some ideas about the security systems. The first archivist's harmonics carried resigned amusement. The galaxy, it seemed, would have to get used to having humans in their libraries. Some knowledge, after all, was best protected by those who understood the weight of wielding it.